Hey guys, what's going on? I'm here at Insanya. It's a beautiful island here. It's gorgeous here. Let me flip this around so you can see it. So this is the residency where I live, and here's a swimming pool. I used it like 2 days ago. It was freaking cold here, despite like 24 degrees. Oh, it was 24 degrees. It's still like kind of warm, but it's not warm enough to like really swim in water. It's like freezing. It's like, yeah, ice water basically feels like. But anyways, today I want to talk a little bit about like a recap my 11th year in China, staying here in China, living and working here in China, in Shanghai. So I have to fly back actually tomorrow back to Shanghai in January. So it's pretty cold. Happy New Year. It's Wednesday. What is that? The 6th, January 6th, 2021. Okay. So let me show you this map here that I just screenshot from my application. This map shows you the amount of travels I have conducted the past just 1 year, within like 12 months or so. So I traveled to just 3 countries. Just the month prior to the outbreak in Wuhan. So you can see I have traveled to 28 cities, and that's only by air. So if you include the travel I have conducted by trains, it will be easily like 50. But these are like I believe it's 28 different cities, so it's not just. So I might have gone to some cities like multiple times, but so total within a year like 50 different cities within like even during the pandemic. The only time when my travels were halted was in February. Basically, I know the exact details when I stopped traveling. So on January 25th, I was still in Beijing working on my last project. And then I flew to Sanya, took the New Year's vacation for a few days, and I flew back to Shanghai. And so during February, my entire business was halted. So during that time in February, we all had to like stop and then self-quarantine yourself, and we were told basically to just stay home. I was able to go out in Shanghai. It wasn't severe, so you can still go out and buy food and then eat out there, but then you were advised not to just walk around and spread it around, so people actually listened to it. So and then we got over it just in March, and I started actually working again in March, and then by April it was like gone. Virus was under control here in China. So does it prove you that I'm not lying or anything? So that's fact, and that's what I have experienced here in China. So and then during that time and starting from March, basically it hit Europe and the United States, and since then they never really had this pandemic under control. Basically the US and Europe and elsewhere. Basically China was probably the only place that got it under control within just a month or so. So yeah, I think the West is still struggling since March, and they never had it under control because they were too busy just bitching about it since then, just complaining and then blaming China, and then that's all they spend time on, and just basically debating whether the mask was efficient, and then they needed their freedom of expression, their individual freedom, that was more important above anything else. So let it be. So if you want individual freedom, go out and spread the virus. You're welcome to do it, but you're gonna suffer and take the consequences eventually, and then that's what you get. And ironically, when they complain about China doesn't have any freedom, you can't complain about this and that. Ironically, you're the ones living under constrainment not being able to go out and doing your economy is not working, it's not running, and in China I've been conducting my business since March again, and then I have all my freedom I want, but then your ultimate freedom just like means basically just to complain about the government or like to criticize about them. That's kind of like your ultimate freedom. Go ahead if you think this is your most important freedom. I can live freely here without being harassed or like people trying to kill me or give me this virus. I'm a free person here. Yeah, you choose what you want. I'm happy with that. I'm here. I'm safe. In the last 3-4 years, I've traveled so much. It's like crazy. I travel like just as last year, as I said, like to 50 different cities. Just basically once a week. 50, yeah. Once a week, I travel to a different city to work and stuff. So combine these 3 years, 3-4 years, I've traveled more than my past 30-40 years I lived in the United States and Europe combined, basically. So that's a tremendous amount of time that I actually spent seeing the country like in massive volumes that you cannot fathom. I mean, now what I have experienced here and stuff, what I'm telling you is doesn't make me an expert in like a China expert. No, I don't think so. I'm not a professional journalist or a writer, a copywriter, whatever. But there seems to be like one group that claim to be a China expert, and it's a big group. These are the so-called China expert who probably never been to China or visited China once. They don't speak Chinese. What else? And consume tons of amount mainstream media that broadcast like on a constant basis all these nonsense, all these lies, and with all these statistics and all these like garbage that they consuming, and then claiming they're like experts. It will be the same like if somebody here, a Chinese person that lives here, doesn't speak a word of English and never went to America and consumes probably some propaganda and stuff and claim he's like an American expert. What do you think of that person? It's like now you have so many of these YouTubers and general population in the United States that believe in all these Western narratives, from mainstream media. Even I have to say, even among like really intelligent people, after a while they keep pounding you with all these like narratives on the medium. At some point, oh gosh, I mean, it must be true at some point, if you listen to it over and over again on the news. I mean, if this is the only source they have, it's really hard not to believe at some point. I mean, even when I first came here, I didn't know shit, so I almost believe some of the content that what I've heard and stuff. But when I moved here, eventually, it took me also like a few years, took me a little bit until, I understood the history behind it, what happened, and why the way it is, partially because of U.S. imperialism, partially, and the U.S. hegemony, basically trying to still dominate the world, and then trying to make everybody still poor, so nobody actually competes with them. If China rises at some point, it's already on the process rising, and on a passing lane. Nobody's gonna make the dirty works, and nobody's gonna make like manufacturing like shoes and for the rich. I mean, not the rich. I mean the one who controls the world, basically the West. If China rises, you probably have to make your own shoes, at some point, or you won't get this cheap labor anymore. Let me show you this map again. It actually shows you a certain pattern where I have traveled to. You can see in a pattern, like most of the areas are like the eastern part, the more developed part of China. So lots of travel there because a lot of projects that I worked on. Because the rest of the part, I have to say, it is still underdeveloped and kind of poor. I can't afford me to hire me to go there to work. So so I had a few projects in the western part. Luckily, so I've seen like most parts of China, even the most remote parts. For instance, like Urumqi, like Xinjiang, the most talked topic here in mainstream Western media. Xining, Lanzhou, Tibet. Tibet I didn't go last year, but then prior, I went there. So I went as far as Urumqi and so most of these remote areas that are still developing. And my personal experience in Xinjiang was that it was just like any other cities, basically. The population has more. The general population has more Muslim people, so by Uyghurs and Kazakhs, and yeah, I think the majority is like still Han, but then a big portion of the minority percentage is the Uyghur population. So you as soon as you get to the airport, you can see, Muslim folks, doing that work just like anybody else, Man, this guy's loud. Shut up, man. I know it's cold, but now the thing is like going back to these China experts, it doesn't require a lot to be a China expert. All you need to know a little bit is about, it's always like the three regions, or maybe four, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang. These are like the four regions, when I hear all these like words like Xinjiang and Urumqi, I doubt they know Urumqi or know that Urumqi is the capital of Xinjiang. All they hear is like Xinjiang and Tibet and all this. Whenever I think the Western media actually programmed them to become like this in terms of when they hear the word Xinjiang, it becomes synonymous with like the word concentration camps and forced labor and what else? Yeah, a bunch of like really negative association. I was just thinking in regards to this stupid, like, they claim they claim they put several million or 1 or 2 million people in concentration camp. This is a word that I use like so lightly, that they have really achieved, to believe like that Xinjiang equals like concentration camps and forced labor and stuff. Let me tell you something about this. So I was just interrupted by a phone call. So where was I? So we have 3 types of camps, basically. One that is extreme, that these are like prison camps, just regular camps. You have it anywhere in the world. Just like regular prisons. And they kind of like mix it up. Probably taking a photo from the prison and then say like, oh, this is like one of their re-education camps. Oh, these are their language centers. And the second thing, it's like the regular re-education camps where they actually probably have people who are radicalized and trying to re-educate these guys. And then the third one are just like regular language centers where they're trying to offer these people that don't speak Mandarin to give them better opportunities. Of course, then they're going to say like they twist the narratives and saying like, oh, they force these people to learn Mandarin and then learn all this propaganda and all that stuff. So there's a lot of like details and stuff that where they mix it and then just twist the narratives, so it makes it like really sound really bad. And for some reason, I don't, they call it like concentration camps. I'm not sure if there is mandatory to learn Mandarin in these areas. But if you call just enforcing somebody to learn the national language a concentration camp, then the U.S. would have 300 million people in concentration camp because they're forced to learn English. Another thing I want to talk about is they call these regular laborers, manufacturing laborers, they call them forced labor, slave labor, basically. So I believe Volkswagen, I see in documentary, Volkswagen just moved their uh, manufacturing facilities to Xinjiang right now, and they have been criticized, and it becomes like, the reason why they moved to Xinjiang is because it's cheaper there, because it's developing area. Before it was like in Guangdong areas, in what's that? Dongguan, Shenzhen. Back then, it was there, and because it was still cheap there. And why didn't they call like these places like forced labor on Han people, like on Chinese people? Slave labor. Back then, all of a sudden, like it's a normal process when things get expensive. You're gonna move your production facilities to elsewhere in Southeast Asia and Xinjiang elsewhere. And why don't you call like Vietnam or Thailand, like Laos, whatever you like, Cambodia, like sweatshops, like forced labor, concentration camps. And then now all of a sudden, because they have some beef with China, now all of a sudden they call like Xinjiang forced labor, slave labor, and concentration camps. Yeah, it's just these like very simple processes, for the economy that you move. Another note on like they call it always like the genocide, or in Xinjiang constantly, because they were forced to learn Mandarin, and then they say that their culture has been stripped off, from their identity. They taken away their cultural values, and stuff. Okay, let's do a side-by-side comparison with the United States and China. I've lived in both countries. Okay, so where do you see like actually traditions of Native Americans in the States where they still wear the costume and just walking around and stuff? The only time I saw that was in reservoirs, in confinement, basically people, and these are like concentration camps, basically. These Native Americans have been pretty much wiped out. Their language were taken away, so we're eventually forced to speak English. If you don't survive. Yeah, I mean, I went to that was Utah at Antelope Canyon. That's the only time I saw them wearing like costumes. But then they only wear this like for tourist attraction, basically. And yeah, that's the only like where you actually can see like people like wearing their traditional costumes. And I don't see, except for California, they speak in a lot of people speak in Spanish, but that's so much for multiculturalism in the United States. But I have to tell you, when you travel to each province here, different provinces, they really speak their own language or dialect, or language is completely different. They still have their own cultural values, their cultural traditions. It's still there. You go to Xinjiang, you go to Yunnan, still people wearing like their traditional costumes, working around. So I went to Yunnan in Dali, and there's a minority called like Baizu. They're still still following the traditions. They still speak their own language and stuff. And same in Tibet, in Xizang, and Xinjiang. Now they have option if you want to go to like a local school, or like a Mandarin school, basically, like where you can still learn but then a lot of people consider like opportunities, like learning like probably Mandarin will be like you're better off in the future, you get more opportunity. That's more about it. But then making a big fuss about saying, oh, that's like enforcing Mandarin on people so they lose your cultural identity. You have still the option. You have the option to learn whatever you want. The government is not enforcing anything. But if you want to stuck at home, no value to your profession in the future, and go ahead, and do whatever you want. That's your choice. If you want to learn like additions, a certain profession, like a language, certain skills, that's why they have these education camps where you can, give you extra skills, language, whatever skills you know need to prepare for your better future, and that's part of the poverty alleviation. You know that the effort that they doing throughout China. I made actually another experience that when I went to Xining, which is the like the far also like a far western part of China, a lot of like minorities. A lot of Muslim people and Zhang people, like Xizang people, ethnic groups. And I went to the airport and I noticed like a lot of people wearing all these like traditional costumes. And I asked my assistant, "Hey, what's that? What's their ethnic background?" And said these are like Zhang people, like from Xizang, basically. Yeah, and then I noticed something that they don't really speak Mandarin. So when they went through security, basically, and a security guy was asking them to take off your mask, and I couldn't understand. And that guy keeps repeating, and that woman, she was probably in her 20s, like she couldn't understand a word. So that's a problem that you're facing when you don't speak the language. Just like you know, in the United States, you know, if you come from whatever another country or grew up, you know, with a certain ethnic group that you only speak in your language, and but the majority speaks English, and you're left behind basically if you don't speak the language. But in America, I don't think you have a choice. You will have to, you need to speak, and which is a good thing, you know. But there's this double standard when in China, when they do something, you know, to enforce people to speak a certain language. It's called whatever, like re-education camps or like concentration camps, you know, all this like negative association. When the United States does that, it's always like a good thing, you know. Okay, guys, sorry for a rush. I might have missed a lot of stuff that I wanted to say. I gotta run. But on a final note, I want to say rather like a very controversial topic that nobody wants to talk about. When I first moved here to Shanghai in 2009, I was, I mean, I'm just telling you what I've seen, okay? I had like, not scams, but these, you know, in Shanghai basically. And unfortunately, these people were like from Xinjiang. That was back in 2009. It's just like everybody told me to be aware of these people, be cautious. You know, unfortunately, it's these people that committed a lot of like these petty crimes, you know. But nobody wants to talk about this because it's sort of like sensitive when you're calling out a certain group, you know. When you're calling out this group, people like, you don't think you're racist, you know, just same thing. If you criticize about Israel, you're being called as a racist maybe and stuff like that. But I've never been to Israel, so I can't really say anything about Israel. But I live in China, and this is what I have experienced. That, you know, a lot of like these petty crimes, stealing, pickpocketing, at some point stabbing, because I'm not sure if they still have this law, but back then they had this like law for minorities. As a minority, you can carry your traditional weapons, you know, which they had knives, traditional knives. So apparently there were like a lot of instances where stabbing was involved. You know, when they got in a fight, they took out their knives and then stabbed people. You know, that's why a lot of people were scared. You know, Chinese people, and they actually told me not to get involved into this. Don't, you know, argue with these people. You know, and I didn't know. I had personal experience with that, but I don't. Maybe tell next time. I got lucky. I got away from this. But yeah, and after maybe 2017, there were a series of terrorist attacks and stuff, you know, between 2010 to 17, I believe, around that time frame. And by that time, I think after 2017, a lot of these people with petty crimes and stuff that commit petty crimes were sent back actually to Xinjiang, and all of a sudden, like, there were no more like these petty crimes anymore, you know, in Shanghai. I think it was the same mayor from Xinjiang. He did actually a good job, and then he was actually sent to Xinjiang to actually take care of that province. And all of a sudden, because of the series of terrorist attacks, so he sent this guy over there, and all of a sudden, like, he solved it, and then took care of that. He took probably the same measures, and then yeah, that was sort of like my kind of like experience. The negative experience I made. I'm not. Let me show you the surroundings a little bit. It's pretty nice here, right? Let me show you the lake here. So this is so pretty here. This is a swimming pool over there.